And I was in this, it was almost like a mist, like a presence of a divine being cradling me, holding me, and comforting me. And I really wasn't afraid. It felt like there was a couple of weeks or a month conversation going on here with this divine being. And I was shown, first of all, that I had never really enjoyed my life. I was shown three very poignant things. The first thing I was shown is that I'd never really seen a sunrise or the sunset. But I was shown, I was like, as though it was like on a panoramic screen in front of me, I was shown what the metaphoric value of each day of our life, the day, the sun rising, the sun setting, and the absolute privilege of being alive and being able to experience the physical embodiment and the start and the end of a day of a life. And I was just shown I had never really appreciated the experience of life, like of being alive from dawn to dusk.
My guest today is Chrystal Rae, who had a near-death experience when the Jeep she was in was bumped off the road, plummeting 80 feet into a ravine that she had to climb out of. And it rolled 10 times before this all happened. And her story is nothing short of amazing. But maybe even more amazing to me is the message that she is bringing back, that love is all that matters. And so today we're going to talk not only about her near death experience, but about a lot more. We're going to go very deep. So I'm super excited. Chrystal, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lori, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it's great. Well, why don't we start with your experiences that you've had before this NDE in childhood? Because I feel like from what we've talked about, you're not very tethered into your body and you have had some really unusual
Yeah.
out of body experiences.
So I'll start from when I was a child, and I'll give you some context to put the near-death experience in. I came from a dysfunctional, functional home, I guess, normal home, and some houses in America anyway. My mom was an alcoholic, and my dad was absent, and I had to grow up really, really early. So I was an adult by the time I was 5. I was making dinner, I was cleaning. I had a baby sister when I was 10 that I basically raised like my own child. But so my childhood was really challenging. And I think on a soul level, we probably choose to come in with certain aspects so that we can understand them viscerally in our own body, but also be aware of that when we see it in others. So I was really confused about this as a child. Like, why was I in this family where my mom was so ill and mentally ill with alcoholism? And really what happens as a child, when you come from a home like that, is you start to believe that there's something wrong with you. And you're always trying to please and make everyone happy and fix everyone. And you always feel unworthy. At least this is how I felt. I can speak for myself. I felt really unworthy and like I wasn't good enough. And I was always just trying to do better. And I almost felt like my mom was like her drinking was me, like it was my fault. Like if I was a better little girl, then my mom would be better. And because she had all of us kids, that she had 3 children, she was a single mom pretty quickly, and she was working several jobs. And I know now as an adult, like how hard it is. I remember being single on my own, out of school, and how hard it is just to take care of yourself. I can't imagine having 3 little beings looking up to you for everything and having their own issues. But I went to school with bald spots and bruises, and I made up all the lies, like I fell down and all the stuff. And I just had this it was like a very posture kind of life. Nobody really knew who I was because it was all a secret. On the outside, people just thought of me as like a happy child or normal child. And I think on 1 or 2 occasions, I had confided in somebody, one of my friends or something, who told their mom, and then the moms came after me. And it was really sad because I would get in trouble, my mom would get in trouble, and it was not good. So I learned how to be more discreet about my childhood. But my first near-death experience, I think, as you were saying about being untethered, my mom was very strange about certain things. She would have company over, and although we didn't have a lot of money, she would make sure that they had food, and we, the children, which we were 3 at the time, and then fourth when my mom got remarried, but we weren't really we weren't really given meat because that was expensive. So we would eat like vegetables or rice or something like that. But this one particular day, she bought watermelon, and I don't remember exactly how old I was. It's pretty blurred now that I'm a little older than 30. But I would imagine I was probably around 6 or 7, maybe 8. But anyway, I don't like watermelon. I have never liked watermelon. It was like this giant piece of watermelon with these giant seeds. And so, just as any other kid would do, you have to eat everything on your plate. And she gave me this watermelon, so I was forced to eat it. So I just crammed it in my mouth, and one of those big black seeds got stuck in my throat. And I remember I couldn't breathe, and I remember everybody freaking out, and I was turning blue, and the next thing you know, I was out. I don't remember anything. And then all of a sudden, I'm following this ambulance, and it's such a sad story because I don't really think about this one. It's been such a long time ago, but I just remember being tethered to this body of this little girl. And really the consciousness that was tethered was still a little girl. It wasn't like the soul wisdom consciousness. It was like the little girl consciousness tethered to the body. And I remember following the body and just thinking, if I don't get back in there, I'm not that body, that entity is not going to survive. And I don't remember how I got back in there, but I remember getting back in. I never told anyone about this. Certainly wouldn't have told my mom about it because I would have gotten in trouble for that or something. So life goes on, and I'm just trying to survive my childhood, continue on. And I remember a really poignant part of my story, and this will relate further in the future, really important to the future story. So if pay attention to some of the details here, because this is like something that's super important for my life and for my journey. And I think it's not just a message for me, but it's really a message for all of us. So one morning I heard my mom like thundering down the hall, and I would always just like be curled up in my bed, just like afraid, like I didn't know who was going to be getting in trouble, but I knew it was one of us. It was either me, my brother, my sister, one of us is in trouble. And it was like 6 in the morning. I remember that I was in my Cinderella pajamas and I was all curled up in my bed, and my mom was thundering down the hall, and she just stormed in the room and grabbed me by the hair and pulled me down the hall, and she just threw me on the floor in the kitchen. And I really didn't know what I had done, but I knew obviously I had done something. I just remember being just like scared. And then she pointed to the ceiling, and I remembered she had told me I was supposed to clean this grease spot. I was over the stove and had a grease spot on the ceiling. And I guess she had told me a couple of weeks prior to do that, which I hadn't, with all my other little girl chores, I had not gotten to, going to school and taking care of my sister and this and that. So I didn't argue. I didn't anything. I knew with my mom, I think my dad could never say I'm sorry. And so one thing that always calmed my mom down was, even if I wasn't sorry, I would say, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And so it would just kind of like, I could just see the fire like coming out of her, and she would just cool down. And so I got up on there and I just started, I remember just being, and I don't know if you've ever been in this kind of place where I was just like, it was like in deep sorrow, like not like a poor, pitiful me sorrow, but more like a deep wailing of my soul. Like I was so young and I was so tired. Like I was already so tired. I was like, this life is just so hard. I was just exhausted, like on an emotional soul level. And I remember I had heard all the stories about Jesus and God, although I always make the joke that in our house, God was only damned. That's the only God that was allowed in our house. But, and I had heard the stories about Jesus and God and heaven and hell and all of that. And I remember I felt, I was really young, but I think I was, because I had to be an adult really, really young. I remember thinking that's a corrupt story. You're going to be good to get accolades to go to heaven, and you're going to be good to avoid hell, like getting burned. And that's not really good. You're trying to get something. That's not, and I remember thinking, I don't want to be good to get to heaven, and I don't want to be good to avoid hell. I just want to be good. I just want to be a good person. And that was like literally my first like real expression of self-worth, because in that moment, somehow it hit me, that means you are good. And I was like, I am good. And I was like, it was like an awakening for me. And it was like, it was so beautiful. I can't even remember. It was like the sun burst through the clouds kind of experience. And I started with this conversation with God while I was just rubbing the ceiling. And I started chatting with God. And I said, to find out that God exists after you die also feels like you're cheating. Like if you're really God and you can part the seas and do all the stuff, then why can't I know that you're real, like before I die? And also I remember thinking and saying, if you could help my mom stop drinking, then I would really believe in God. And I remember thinking that was even more impossible, like a more impossible thing to ask God to help, because I thought my mom would never stop drinking and be happy. I remember I asked that she would stop drinking and be happy. And then with that, I was in deep contemplation. It was like really deep, profound thought. And I turned around and I walked off this counter. And this is when things got a little crazy because I started, when you fall, like your head falls first. If you're falling into an empty swimming pool or something, the physics of it is that your head goes down. So I had that whole sensation of falling forward. And all of a sudden, there was three of me. And there was the body falling towards the earth. Time slowed down. There was the soul entity that lived within this body. And there was also this all-knowing observer who was also me, which was really confusing because that all-knowing observer wasn't buying into my poor little pitiful me story at all. Because that all-knowing observer knew that I had signed up for this. Also, that nothing really happens to the soul. I always give this analogy of like, if your life is like a movie with lights and shadows flickering on the screen, whether it's a horror show or it's a comedy or a love show or there's whatever it is, cartoons, you turn the projector off and the screen is white, it unaffected, unscathed. And that's our soul. So that all-knowing observer was that white screen that knew that none of this was affecting the divine essence, the purity of the soul. That's really, if you think about the seed and the source never being separate, and if we are children of the divine or children of a loving, omnipresent creator, then what we are is love and the children of that. And so if I plant I don't know, a rose, I get a rose. If I plant a tomato, I get a tomato. So if I'm a seed of love, then I am love. I didn't know any of this as a child, though. I was just freaked out that this all-knowing observer was not buying into my story at all. And I really didn't relate to the body, but I related to the entity that was within the body that I will call like the soul essence, the individuated part of the divine that has fractured and splintered off into a part of the divine to experience itself through me, as me, and for me, and for the benefit of all. And so I really recognized myself as that. And that essence was falling, or I don't know if it was falling or if it was just stationary, and the swirling time and space was going around it, going up. And so it made me feel like I was falling down. But anyway, it was like a tornado. I called it like a whirling time and space. And I was in the center. There was no sound. So it wasn't like a real tornado. It was absolutely no sound. It was pure and absolute silence. And then I ended up in a serene space, like a night, like a beautiful, serene night. And I remember it was very warm and comforting. It wasn't scary at all. And I looked out on the horizon and I could see all this punctuated lights in the sky. And I knew, like almost as a voice within me told me, and it wasn't like a voice like a person talking, but it was like within me that communicated this as a knowing. Those are the stars. This is time and space. Those are the stars, pure energy, and that's what you are. And boom, with that, I was back in my body. But here's the thing, like a cat, I had landed on my feet. There's no possible way that I could have landed on my feet, but I landed on my feet. When something like that happens and you have no context for it, and you're a child, so I thought I must have fallen and had this really cool dream and somehow made it to my feet. So I should have like a bruise or some kind of bump or bleeding or something on my forehead. So I ran to the bathroom and I was looking everywhere, like, where do I have a bruise? Nothing. And then I was like, so I was like, it hit me. This was real. This really happened. And I called out to my brother and I was like, Mark. And me and my brother were really close. And he came in and I said, he's a year younger than me. And I said, God saved me. There was 3 of me and I was falling through time and space and we are stars and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like spinning all this out. And he's, what? God, have you lost your mind? And I distinctly remember him saying, you need a straight jacket or something to that effect, which made me laugh. Like I started laughing because I was like, oh, this does sound really weird. And I said, and we both started laughing. I remember we ended up laughing and just ended up on the floor laughing. And then I got the serious note, which was really cool because he's my witness. I said, hey, Mark, I know this sounds really weird and nobody knows that it happens but me, like for sure, because I was the participant. But could you please be my witness that I told you this? Because I don't want to think sometime in the future, something whispered inside of me, let him be your witness, that you at least told him this. Because, and right now, truthfully, it does seem like it was a dream because it's so far back. And he was like, sure, I'll be your witness that you're crazy. That's okay. So every year I would say, do you remember, Mark? And he's like, yes. And so that was really the start of my true spiritual unfoldment, consciously at least. I remember I was so in awe by this experience that I started calling Sunday school buses and I was walking to church and my mom thought literally I had lost my mind. Like she was like I was walking 4 or 5 miles to go to church. My brother and sister signed up for it. I was calling Sunday school buses and I was baptized 5 times because I didn't feel it. I went to all different churches, but so every time they would call who wants to be saved, I would like, I want to be saved. And I would go down and I would get in the water and and they would say, you're going to come out new and you're going to be something new and you're going to feel the love of God. And I would come out of the water and truthfully, I felt like me, like nothing had changed. And I almost felt like a failure, truthfully. Oh, it's going to make me cry. I'm such a baby. But I remember I almost felt like a failure. Like I was truly the bad little girl and that I wasn't, such a hard thing to
I'm like
remember.
Oprah, making everybody cry. I'm
You
usually the one crying though.
are. So anyway, I remember thinking it's true. I am, even God knows, like I'm not worthy. So I kept trying and trying, like all these different places. And as I said, 5 times I was baptized. I went to Pentecostal, I went to Baptist, I went to Charismatic Christian. And my last venture, this is over a span of years, by the way. So I was growing up, I was a young woman. I was 13, I was 14, I was 15, and closer to 17, right before I left home, which I ran away from home, by the way, not surprising. And I went to one of those evangelistic preachers that they put the hand and then they knock you down and whatever. So I was like, okay. I went to him and there was a big procession of people and a big line and people were just going down. And so I was like, maybe this is it. This is like the real thing. And so he did put his hand on my forehead and I did go down, but I immediately knew that it was not the divine presence of love. And I'm not saying that there aren't some people out there that are, but this particular person was not. And I remember I immediately got up and said that, that's hypnotism. That's not real. Like you shouldn't be you shouldn't be trying to fool people. Like I knew. And then they ushered me out. I remember being ushered out quietly through the back. And then that kind of disappointed me. And on top of that, like I had some really serious home life problems that I had to deal with, like survival kind of problems. Like I had to move out of my house. I ran away and then I had to start taking care of myself. I had to find a place to live. I was working, I was going to school. So when I left home, I remember my mom, her speech was like, if you don't come home today, then you never existed. I never want to see you again. And you're going to be a whore, you're going to be a prostitute, you're going to be a loser, you're going to be a drug addict, and I don't want anything to do with you. And so I remember that was like so heartbreaking. But more than that, I think it was probably, as again, we say we pick our parents, I think it made me so mad. Like it was after I got through the sadness of it, I was like so determined to prove her wrong about me. And I was going through finishing up in my high school years and I made straight A's and I bought my own car, first car, I had my own apartment. I did all this stuff basically to prove her wrong, which was like the best speech she could have given me probably. Because I never drank, I never did drugs. Of course, I didn't do all the stuff that she had predicted that I would do. And really, statistically, she was right. Most people in my situation, And I'm not to say, one of the things I have to say is like, you know, when you're young, pretty, innocent, and you're on the street alone, there's a lot of wolves out there. It was hard times. It was not easy. A lot of abuse and a lot of betrayals from people that I trusted. And I wouldn't recommend this path for anyone if you can avoid it, but it was the right path for me. And this was the right parent for me too. And I'll tell you why in the future, why she was such a great mom for me. So anyway, I went on with my life and I moved on and took care of myself, started modeling, had a job. But my real goal in life at that time was I really just wanted to get married and have children and have a family. I wanted to have a normal family. Like I wanted to be the Brady Bunch, you know? I wanted 5 children and a happy home and all that stuff. And really modeling all that wasn't my true goal in life. My true goal was like to be in a happy union and have children and live happily and just have a simple little life. That's what I really wanted. Fast forward, I met my husband and I had who was a lovely man, and but he was the kind of guy that he wanted to save someone. And I at that time I wanted a hero. I wanted Prince Charming. I wanted someone to save me. And so it worked out well because he wanted to save, I wanted to be saved. And he was a really smart guy, and I've always really was really attracted to smart men. And I really loved him. He was like, I truly love this man. Like I feel like he's one of my soulmates. The marriage didn't work out, but I think our friendship was always there, and we still are friends even today, even though I'm remarried and super happy in my marriage. By the way, it's a couple of years in, but it's been great. It took me 28 years to do that again. But anyway, I just got married again a couple of years ago. But so I went into this marriage hoping it would be something that it didn't turn out to be. I think I had such high expectations, nobody could ever have lived up to that. And he didn't know what he was signing up for. I had a lot of emotional issues in his defense. I needed a lot of love and a lot of care that wasn't within his capacity to give me. So I ended up getting divorced. And this is when getting into my 30s. And it was like one of the saddest things that ever happened because again back to the childhood, I felt like the imposter again. Somebody had unmasked me like it was true. I wasn't worthy, I wasn't good enough. Even this man who had given children was ready to let me go and had seen that I was actually the wicked witch or whatever. Not And so it was really a hard time for me. And I remember signing, I didn't even go to a lawyer. I was like, my husband at the time, he had done very well. He had gone from rags to riches over the 13 years that we were married, because as I said, he was a really smart guy. But the more success he had, the less united he was within our marriage. Let's just put it that way. And so he had a lot of assets by the time we were getting divorced, and I didn't even get a lawyer, but he took a year to hide all his assets, which I didn't even care. I just said, show me where I get the kids. And because I had come from a broken home and I knew how that felt, I remember my mom telling me that my dad was bad and that he was horrible and that I should love my stepdad because he was the one who cared. And I remember when she had children, she had a daughter with my stepdad. And I remember feeling like she was from the good dad and I was from the broken dad, like the bad dad. And so I felt like there was a part of me that was bad. And I didn't really want that for my children. I wanted my children to have access to their father because I knew how horrible and how sad it was to feel like you came from the broken part or whatever. So my ex-husband turned out to be a really good, caring dad. He obviously wasn't perfect. He did some things that I guess all people have their ups and downs. But overall, he was a good dad to the children. And I wanted him to be involved as much as possible, which is why I really didn't even want to date. I just wanted to keep the space open where he would come and see the kids. So it was already a year and a half out, and I hadn't even gone on a date. And I had met a really nice man, and he was like, you should come on this trip with me and my family, and we're going to go skiing, and we have a house in the mountains. It'll be fun. And I was like, I don't know that I'm ready to date. Thank you. But he's like, bring a friend, bring a friend. You can come. Don't worry. I'm not expecting anything. Just come. It's going to be fun. So I invited my cousin and I said, I should go. He's right. I'm like locked up like a hermit. I should. My ex-husband had already funneled through several different girlfriends by that point, and I hadn't even been on a date. So I signed up to go to this trip, and we got there, and It wasn't what I wasn't, I think it wasn't me. I wasn't ready. And also his family, they weren't very embracing of me, and they had different habits than I did. I mean, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't cuss, I don't this, I don't that, I don't watch violent movies. And this is just something that's always been me. And I had lived my life that way because that's just who I was. So it was just very uncomfortable for them, uncomfortable for me, and for my cousin, who was this beautiful 40-year-old woman who had this doe skin and big brown eyes and lush brown hair. And she was a lead clarinetist for the Dallas Opera at the time. And she too said, "Oh, I think this is enough." We were there for 2 or 3 days. I said, "I just want to go home. I don't think I was ready for this." And she's, "Yeah, me too. Let's go." And on the way back to the airport, we had this really horrendous car accident. And this is when my life took a really big shift because of this car accident and the subsequent circumstances that happened as a result of the car wreck. So we were heading up the mountain, which we should have been heading down the mountain, but somehow we were heading up the mountain. I think we took a wrong turn, and then we started sliding, and the car ended up sideways in the middle of this highway, and the people coming down the mountain, obviously on pure ice, could not stop. And I think it was estimated the impact on the car, and it was on my side of the door, was 50 miles an hour, and it spun our car around. We flew off this cliff, and as you mentioned earlier, we fell 25 feet to the ground and then flipped 10 times, ended up at a total of 80 feet all the way down at the bottom of this mountain, slamming into this huge wall of ice in an upside down Jeep. It was a small Jeep with a plastic cover, wasn't even anything substantial. I can talk about what happened after I found myself at the bottom of the mountain, but what's more important is what happened during. So as soon as this car started spinning, time slowed down. I mean, really slowed down, like not just slow motion, but almost stopped. And I was as though I was just kind of viewing everything. And I remember thinking like I didn't know I was going to die today. Like I was kind of surprised. Like I had the sudden realization, oh, we're going to go off this cliff and I'm going to die. And I was surprised by that because there's some part of being human or mortal or something that you just think you're invincible and you're never going to die. And I was kind of shocked by it. And then I remember looking in the car, and the guy driving was like hysterical, and Carmen was in the back screaming. And I remember looking back, and I had never seen such fear or such horror like in anyone's face. She was so panicked, and I just remember feeling such great compassion. So everyone's freaking out, but like Chrystal, she's like completely calm. I'm like the Zen Buddha in the car. And not because I'm so Zen or Buddha, but because time had slowed down, and also because I had had that near-death experience or several times when I was a kid. So I was never afraid of death. I was just like so calm, like, oh, I didn't know I was going to die today. And then everything started happening. The car got hit, and that's when I was above the car, above the scene, and I was in this, it was almost like a mist, like a presence of a divine being. There was no real entity there, but it was like a divine being that was like cradling me, holding me, and comforting me. And I really wasn't afraid, and it was, again, like all this is happening within seconds, but this is, if I could put it into context, it felt like there was a couple of weeks or a month conversation going on here with this divine being. And I was shown, first of all, that I had never really enjoyed my life. Like I was shown three very poignant things, which I never really have been able to figure out, but maybe somebody will have some input on your podcast about what happened. But the first thing I was shown is that I had never really I'd never really smelled, or I think the first thing I was shown was actually I'd never really seen a sunrise or the sunset, which of course I was 30 something years old, I had. But I was shown, I was like, as though it was like on a panoramic screen in front of me, I was shown what the metaphoric value of each day of our life, the day, the sun rising, the sun setting, and the absolute privilege of being alive and being able to experience the physical embodiment and the start and the end of a day of a life. And I was just shown I had never really appreciated the experience of life, like of being alive from dawn to dusk. And then the next thing I was shown is that I had never really smelled freshly cut grass, which I think is really an odd one, right? But it's like that, I guess it's that aroma, that earthy aroma of freshly cut grass and just washed over me. And it was just like, I think it was showing me that I had never really embraced the senses, like the ability to feel, to smell, to hear, to taste, to touch. And then thirdly, I was shown, and probably most poignantly, that I had never really touched anyone, like physically embraced. And of course, I mean, I had children. I had had 2 children. I had 4 miscarriages. So I had 6 pregnancy overall, which is, by the way, one of the, I think, big problems with my marriage was it's really hard when you lose children on your marriage. So in between my son and my daughter, I lost quite a few children. And I think it's not funny. It wasn't funny then, but it's funny now because I remember getting all the genetic testing done and all of that. He had his test, I had my test, and they were like, well, you know, Chrystal, your genetics are fine and your husband's genetics are fine, but your bodies don't like each other. And so if you want to get pregnant, if you had a different mate, you'd be fine. I'm like, wait, what? That's my husband. Like, I can't have a different mate. And it was almost like the universe telling me in direct message, like, you shouldn't have more children with this man. But anyway, I had been combing my children's hair. I had embraced friends. Like, I had actually touched people, obviously. But I was shown, like, one of the gifts of being human is that we have this physical embodiment and that we can actually reach out and touch each other. That's why if you meet me in person, you'll probably get a hug. Like, I'm a very physical girl. I just can't help. Like, I love everyone. Like, when I look at someone, I just see the light in them. And it's really funny because when you see the light in someone, they can see it for themselves more clearly, at least suspect. And so, like, I'll usually, like, at my studios, my yoga studios, I'm a big hugger. Everybody knows, like, I'm a big hugger. So anyway, I was shown these 3 very poignant things. And then my panoramic life review began. And it wasn't as intense as I've heard other people have, but I was shown 3-dimensional and 360 degrees, basically and it's hard to convey this because it was like every thought, every action of my entire life up to that point, good, bad, indifferent, to the minutest detail and the most expansive way out, infinitum, like rippling out. When you try to comprehend what that means, if you're 30 something years old, every single second, good and bad, and the ripple effect, because what that means is I not only saw my actions, I saw how they affected others, and I saw how a kind word had helped someone or an unkind word had hurt someone. And not only them, I had seen the ripple of how it rippled out to their families, to their loved ones, to people in their environment, and how their day had gone and how the rest of their life had gone. And on and on and on is all this information downloaded in a second. Like, and then I remember thinking, well, I didn't really have a lot of shame about my life. I knew I had done some bad things in my life. I had hurt people. But I had always, since I remember, I told you earlier that this will be important later. Since I was a kid, I had always decided that I just wanted to be good. And so even though I failed quite a bit on that path of trying to be good.
Don't we all, Chrystal Rae? Don't we all?
But the intention was always there. So I always let myself off the hook. I remember my first husband, he always said, "You're so good at forgiving yourself." And I said, "Yeah, because I never really meant to hurt. Like, it's not my intention to hurt."
Intention counts more, I think, than anything else, don't you?
Yes. And I was like, so this panoramic view of my life, I was not happy with some of my behavior, of course, and I had let myself down quite a bit. I was also very proud of my behavior, and more than not. But the main thing that I was shown is that in my attempt to be good, like, I wanted to be a good little girl, I wanted to be a good wife, a good friend, a good ex-wife, a good mother, whatever, there was no joy. Like, my life had become a heavy burden. My life, even the be a good mother, be a good friend, be a good this, that was just like, it was like drudgery. It was like, what's the point? Like, why am I here? I knew I had responsibilities with my children, and So that gave me some hope and reason to exist, but there was no joy in my soul. And I was shown that I had carried being good like a heavy backpack, and that it had stolen my joy of my life. And I was told this as a direct message, and I really want to share it, and I always like to share this. I was told directly, each soul, and that means you, is here for the bliss of their own existence. And I was like shocked. I was like, bliss? We're here for bliss? I thought I was here to be responsible, to do the right thing, to take care of my kids, to be good, blah, blah, blah. Joy and bliss is not part of that program. And then I was shown, this is why you exist. This is why everything exists. The entire universe exists. Love is joy and bliss expressed. That's what love is, and that's what God is. It's joy and bliss expressed. And we're not here to be miserable. Yes, things will happen. And this is, I think, really confusing for a lot of people. And no, it was, especially for me, is like, how could these horrible things, like really horrible things, and we don't even need to mention them, they're so horrible, that happen to people. How could that be part of anyone's bliss? And really, it's a question that I really don't want to answer, because I think it would be unkind to answer that with people who have such pain and sorrow. They've lost a loved one, they've been abused, they've been hurt, they've been tortured, whatever has happened. I can't say that I can give a really good reason for that. I can just give my perspective and what I was shown and what I learned when I was in this space of absolute grace, which is that my soul knew all of this before I came. And my soul was excited to challenge myself and to change and to know the things viscerally. So I talk about my childhood and being born into this family of abuse and alcoholism and abandonment. And I remember feeling very, what kind of God would do this, when I came to some kind of like consciousness as a young woman. And now, as I'm a teacher and a thought leader in the community that I'm part of, in the yoga studios and such, I realize that it's such a blessing, because anyone, and I really love working with young women in particular, can look in my eyes and know she's not just spouting out something that she hasn't experienced. Like the pain and the sorrow, to the degree that I have seen it and I've experienced heartbreak and abandonment and abuse and trauma and drama and all of the stuff. So when I see that in other people's eyes, though I do have deep compassion, and I know their sorrow and pain is real for them, I also know that there is a bigger context to the story, and that they will survive, and that one day, maybe not this life, but one day they will understand too. But meanwhile, I mean, they can look in my eyes and in my energetic presence know that there is a hope, that they too have hope. And that's one of the great gifts of my childhood, is that if you look at the odds of just anybody coming from a childhood that I did, I mean, most likely they would not end up in the space that I did. I beat the odds. And I did that not because I'm so brilliant or so smart or so wonderful, but I did that because I had a lot of help from divine forces, and because it was a really important thing for my soul to do. One of the things I was shown in this out-of-body experience I told you that was hovering over this car wreck was that there's multiple timelines for our life. Possibilities, potentialities, nothing is set. Everything has already happened and in completion in the eternal now. So the one thing that is that no one will be left alone, abandoned, forever lost. We will all make our way back to our source, the loving, omnipresent creator at the center of it all. And some of us will take deep dives into dark shadows and muddy places and horror and pain and suffering and torture and whatever it is that we choose to do, or we get to experience, however it may be in our lives. But the end product will always be love and light. And when I think about love, I think about a line or a continuum, a circle, or I guess a line would be easier to think about it in this way. If there's a point in the middle that would be neutral, and there's a point on one side that would be pure light, and the other side would be darkness, but it circles back around and it's all one thing. And by the way, when I was out of my body, I was shown that there is no empty space in the universe. And darkness is actually a shade of light or a hue of light, that there is actually no such thing as darkness. Darkness is a very dim light, but light all the same, it's energy. And so wherever we find ourselves on that continuum, we will all find our way back to the center. And it's our gift and our choice, free will choice, that we get to choose that path. And we do come in with some preset predispositions. Like I wasn't born with, let's say, incredible music ability or mathematical ability, which I would have loved, both of those things, but they were not part of my journey. Other people, they come in with those qualities, just born like that, writing Beethoven at 5 years old or something. Those are what I mean by predispositions or sort of soul gifts, or even on the opposite spectrum, where they would come in with some disabilities and things, limitations and families and things that would hold you back from doing certain things that you might want. You might be born into a culture that, holds women back, or you might be born into a culture of poverty or caste system, or you might be born a queen and have your duty and you have to live your duty. You have no freedom because you're the queen. So whatever the spectrum is, but
Can we
your
add
soul.
one more thing in here? I want to come back to something you said earlier. When you
Okay.
talked about the bliss and you talked about us choosing that, and it may not be something that people can embrace because it seems like there might be negative situations. But I want to bring back something you said earlier, which is the white screen.
Okay.
The white screen, you can't be harmed as a soul. And knowing that, how that also adds to us choosing it because we know truly we're the white screen.
Right. Right. So that the ideal that we come in and we have these horrible situations and predispositions, the soul is happy to do that, but it also knows that it can't be harmed. That, like I mentioned earlier, there's this white screen, the screen of which our lives are projected onto, that is untouched, unscathed, but somehow the screen is better for the experience, if that makes sense. And not only the screen, but the entire universe is better because it's each person, and from a tiny beetle to an ant to a grain of sand, everything in the universe is essential. Without that grain of sand, this universe would not exist. Without that cockroach, this universe would not exist. Everything is divinely planned and necessary as a part of this greater picture. So if God were to experience, I don't even like the word God, let's say the divine essence of the universe, the pure essence of love, were to be able to experience itself in all of its fullness, then it would have to have contrast, knowing that in the end that there is no suffering, truthfully. There's just, and also from my perspective, I've been shown that many people who, although there is pain, and I said this in one podcast, and somebody was really upset about it because I said, when there's a certain amount of pain, you will come out of your body. And somebody was really in the comments was really upset about it because they said, oh no, pain is real. And I'm like, yes, there is real pain, and yes, we will suffer, and it could be excruciating. But when it no longer serves the soul, like if that pain does not serve your soul, this is not an unkind universe. You're not going to just be suffering for no reason. You may choose that suffering on a soul level because you wanted to know what that experience is like. And again, when the movie's over, nothing has happened. No one can hurt you. And there is no judgment. That was another thing that I was shown in this out of body experience, is that there's only compassion for us and kindness. And yes, we get to relive those less wonderful moments of our life, those shameful moments of our life, and the beautiful moments of our life. But there's no judgment by some superimposed upon us. We might feel shame and we might judge ourselves and we might want to come back and do better and try again, but we're not even forced to come back. So this whole ideal of, in some spaces, there's this ideal you're going to come back as a cockroach or you're going to come back and be tortured. That is not love. That is not love. You may come back and be the victim, where in one life you were the predator, but it's because you want that. You want to have that experience. You're like, oh my gosh, I need to understand this more clearly. Can I please come back and be the victim? That is the universe, not you did wrong. First of all, what kind of God would do that? Let me give you a limited consciousness. Let me give you some predispositions. Let me put you in the most horrid possible space where you might actually fail, and then I'm going to punish you for that. That's ridiculous.
And
I mean, it's
that's human thinking anyway. It's not love
no.
thinking, because pure love doesn't
Oh,
have a human punishment system. It doesn't exist like that.
it does not exist like that. And also, if you think about it from a broader spectrum, if you think about infinity, if you could even possibly imagine infinity, let's just see, okay, 1,000 years, 100,000 years, 200,000 years, a million years, a billion years, a trillion years, a trillion years. And then you have this little speck, like this 89 years, this 100 years. And by the way, that's going to affect the rest of eternity. You're going to be punished for all of eternity for that one little speck. The math is off. I'm not a mathematician, but the math is off. This big thing should be more important than this little speck. And so, I mean, it never made sense to me, this idea of hell and heaven. And what did make
Or wrath of God. That doesn't make sense to me either.
no. Wrath of God, first of all, he gives you this limitations. If you wanted me to be so perfect, why didn't you make me perfect? And then I would never fail. But that's not what God wanted. He wanted us to have, he loves, I mean, like there is so much love in the universe for our soul that we get to, our joy is that we can even hate our creator and be loved absolutely the same as if we loved our creator. That's freedom. That's like a child. If I was to have a child and I say, you have to love me. And if you don't love me, then I'm going to hate you and I'm going to punish you. No, that's not love. I can say, I remember my children were teenagers and I was being told that they hate me because I was the disciplinarian and I was finding out they were sneaking out the window or whatever. They were being punished. And they would tell me, I hate you, or whatever it is that they would say to me that was hurtful. And I remember saying, I don't care if you hate me, I will always love you. And because I love you, I will show up in this way. I will show up and I will try to protect you to the best of my ability, but I can't protect you from yourself. So go ahead and hate me. That's okay. I will always love you. And that just was, they were like, what? Mom is so weird, So continuing on, I'm in this out of body experience. I'm in this space of absolute bliss. I'm speaking to, I'm not even speaking, like I'm having this, not even telepathic, because telepathic is not truly what's happening. It's like a knowing, it's like an instant knowing that there's these multiple timelines. I was shown that there was a lot of different destinies I personally could have taken. I could have exited the planet, number one. I could have died. And I was shown what would happen. I was shown my own funeral. I was shown my kids at my funeral. I showed my kids growing up, having children, going to college, being fine without me. And I was like, what? I thought I was like pinnacle to their success or failure. And again, each soul is here for the bliss of its own existence. If I were to take that path, they would be fine. And their soul would have already signed up for that. And then I was shown that I could come back with some disabilities. I could have come back and been a paraplegic or many options, like too many to even mention. But the one that I chose and the one that brought me the most joy, and that's the one that we all choose, either consciously or not, because I think some people don't want to remember that they consciously chose this. But I was shown that I could come back and I could write a book and tell the world that love is all that matters. That always makes me want to cry because that's what really excited me. And I was like, really? I can write a book? I thought I was the most beautiful thing that I could do was to write a book. I didn't know how I would do that because by this time I was in my 30s. I was a secret poet for sure. I was always writing, but I hadn't completed a college degree because my goal was to get married and have children, not go to college. Why would I go to college? I was going to have children and get married. That's what I thought at that time. And so I was like, okay, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to write a book. And I remember him, this being, by the way, I say him, but it really had no sex. It was just an androgynous being, right? This presence wasn't even a being, this presence that was embracing me and cradling me and supporting me on my journey and showing me these different pathways that I could choose, said, yes, you take this one, you go back, you tell the world. And by the way, it was like tell the world, not just tell one person, not tell people, it's tell the world. And I'm like, the world. Okay, I'm going to tell the world that love is all that matters. And I was like, okay. And by the way, add in your book that sound and light is the future of medicine. So I was like, okay, sound and light is, and that was exciting. We're talking 30 years ago or something to that effect. It was 1997, February 23rd. So however many years that is, time is always a blur for me. But I was told that I was going to write this book and put in the book that sound and light is the future of medicine, which I had no idea what that meant at the time, but I was excited to put it in the book. And that was the path that brought me the most joy. And so that was the path that my soul chose. And I was really excited to come back. And with that, I found myself that's my babies. With that, I found myself back in my body at the bottom of this 80-foot cliff that we had come down. The car was upside down, and I could see the headlights and the wheels spinning, and I could smell gasoline. And I looked over at the guy who was driving, and he was covered in blood, but he said he was fine. And then I was calling out to my cousin Carmen, who was in the back seat, who, by the way, I had seen her like hitting her head on this, like there's a little roll bar, and then hitting her head on this side, and then hitting her head on this side, and then hitting her. And again, we flipped 10 times before slamming into the wall of ice. So there was no response. And I just had this sudden, like, because I had just seen that I get to live, I get to see my children again, I get to write this book, I get another chance to not just be good, but to be joyful, to truly live. Like, I don't think I ever truly had any joy in my life. And I was really excited about it. And I had this sudden fear that this car was going to blow up. So I remember climbing out the window and climbing up this cliff to get help. And at the top of the cliff, there was a big line of cars. And so when I climbed over the cliff, like nobody even could imagine that I had just come up from this. They like, do you know what happened down there? And I'm like, yes, there's 2 more people. And they air flight, and they had to bring my cousin Carmen up on a stretcher, and they took us to the hospital, and it was all a blur. Truthfully, I don't even remember how I got to the hospital, but apparently I was in an ambulance. I don't remember. But I do remember coming in the hospital, and I remember my cousin being wheeled in, and I remember this. There was a lot of weird stuff that started happening once I woke up, because I started seeing auras, which I didn't even have that word. I just started seeing lights around people. I could feel their thoughts and know their feelings. And I saw that somebody was going to steal my purse. I was very concerned about my purse because I had my tickets in my wallet, and like I had a big bag of spiritual books that I had just bought at this really cool store. And I wanted my books and I wanted my purse, but I saw some man in like rubber boots, I imagined to be a fireman, stealing my purse. And I was like screaming out to everyone at the car wreck, like, can you please go down and get my purse? And nobody could find my purse, of course. And then when I got to the hospital, the first thing I encountered when I came into the hospital was this male nurse who grabbed my arm. And he was like, were you guys drinking? And that's like a felony or whatever. And like, your cousin's going to die. And I was like, what? I don't drink. And no, we weren't drinking. And my friend had a couple drinks, but he certainly wasn't drunk. Like he had maybe a glass of wine, but I was like, no, we don't drink. And we weren't doing drugs. And then we had someone come in with less injuries than your cousin, and they passed away, and your cousin's going to die. It was like really harsh. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then I just pushed him off of me, and I pushed my way into where they had my cousin in like the emergency room. And this is where it gets kind of weird because it's amazing story. And then we had someone come in with less injuries than your cousin, and they passed away, and your cousin's going to die. It was like really harsh. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then I just pushed him off of me, and I pushed my way into where they had my cousin in the emergency room. And this is where it gets kind of weird because it's kind of amazing story.
Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.